So today we're going to be making rainbow cookies, and I'm making it for Christmas. And growing up in Brooklyn, it was a really special part of the holidays, and it was very easy to get. You would go to the local Italian pastry store and get all kinds of cookies and pastries for the holidays. But now that I'm living in LA, not so much. You can't get good Italian pastries or rainbow cookies here. You can get them, but keyword here is good. So I decided last year I was going to make them myself. And the first time around, you learn a lot of things, little secrets here and there. So I finally perfected it after a few tries and a lot of calories. So we'll be making rainbow cookies the right way today. So, you know, it takes time because you have to bake the 3 separate colors. And so you do that one at a time in your oven, and then you have to put the colors together with the jam, and you put it in the fridge for a few hours with some weights on it so it compresses, and your cookies are all stuck together the way we want them to be. But it is so worth it. Putting them together actually is not a hard thing. You know, whipping up the batter and putting the colors, it's kind of fun. But the time just comes where mostly they're settling in the fridge or you're waiting for them to cool down. It takes some time, but it's so worth it. Your family's going to love it. So stick around and I'll tell you what we're going to need and we'll get started. We're going to be making rainbow cookies today. And the ingredients you're going to need, and I'm using a 9x13 baking pan. So what you're going to need are 2 8-ounce packages of almond paste, 1.5 cups of softened butter, 1.5 cups of white sugar, 6 large eggs separated, 3 cups of all-purpose flour. You'll need red food coloring, green food coloring, a jar of seedless red raspberry jam, 1 cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips melted, and then we're going to incorporate a 1/2 cup of heavy cream, which we're going to bring to a simmer, not a boil. We're going to make a ganache to go on top of the rainbow cookies. So we will get started and I'll show you how we do this. Stick around. So before we get started baking, I'm going to take my 3 baking pans and I'm going to line them with parchment paper. And I want the parchment paper only to cover the bottom. So I've measured it out, and if you have Reynolds parchment paper, it has little squares on there. So I have 4 squares across, is wide enough for my 9x13 pan. But the first thing I'm going to do is spray my pan with Pam. And then I'm going to put my parchment paper in there. And I'm going to fit it snugly across the edges. And the reason that we don't do the sides, the parchment paper will make it very easy for me to take the separate sheets out of the oven when they're done, when they're cooled. But I don't want to put it on the sides because then you won't be able to actually spread your batter very evenly because your paper is going to crinkle. So I just have it on one side. It's going to make it easier for me to lift my sheets of cookie out of the pan once it's cooked. So I'm going to do that to all 3 pans and prepare them to go in the oven. Parchment paper will also prevent your cookie sheets from burning on the bottom. So my pans are ready. And now we're going to start mixing things together. So the first thing we're going to do is preheat our oven to 375 degrees. So I have my 2 sticks of almond paste, and you can see they're pretty stiff. And we're going to be mixing them with the butter and the eggs. So I'm just going to chop it up a little bit and cut it into smaller pieces. This way I have a head start when it comes to just blending them. So what I didn't include in my recipe when I read the ingredients was almond and pastry, cake and pastry filling. And I'm going to just give this a try. I haven't used this yet, so wait for the end of the video and I'll let you know how that turns out. But I'm only going to put a half a can in here. I'm not putting the whole thing. Smells great. I know it's going to be very tasty. So I have my almond paste and a little bit of almond cake filling in here. And I'm going to separate my eggs. Okay, to the almond paste mixture, I'm going to add 1 capful of almond extract. And with a fork, I'm just going to start breaking down my almond paste. Now, like I said, this is pretty stiff. We're going to add our egg yolks to this. So I've added 6 egg yolks to my almond paste and my almond cake filling. And now we're going to add 1.5 cups of white sugar and 1.5 cups of softened butter. So here we have 1.5 cups of white sugar and 1.5 cups of softened butter. So I'm going to take my handy dandy old school hand mixer, and I am going to put this on low, and as gently as I can, I'm going to mix this together. And because the almond paste is stiff, it's going to take a little while for all this to blend together. And you want to get the paste in between there. If you put this on high, you're going to have almond paste all over your kitchen. So I do not recommend that. All right, so now that we have the almond paste, butter, sugar, all mixed together, we're going to add 3 cups of flour to this. And we're going to do that slowly, 1 cup at a time. So I'm going to start with the first cup. And you can see now I have my 3rd cup of flour in there. And this is a very nice, thick kind of a dough. It's not really a batter. Okay, so here I have my egg whites. And I am going to beat these with my blender until they are fluffy. And we're going to do this until we have the peaks starting to form. I really do love my old-fashioned hand blender. I have a blender on a stand, and I just feel like I have more freedom to go where I want with the blender in the bowl. And we can see right here that the peaks are starting to form on our egg whites. So we're going to take these and put them into our mixture. And we're going to fold this in. Now that we've folded in our eggs, and you can see that it's very well blended, we're going to take our dough and hopefully divide it into 3 equal portions. So we're going to separate them into 2 other bowls. here we have our second batch. Okay, and this is bowl number 3 is our big bowl that we were using for mixing. So they look about even. I'm going to take one of these bowls and get it started in the oven. So I've put my batter, or my dough, it's definitely a dough, into my baking pan, where I'm going to hold onto my paper and spread this out as evenly as I can across the pan. So this is going to be our white layer. Now while this is baking, we'll mix up our colors for the next 2 layers. One will be green and one will be red. Now don't forget, this is, if it looks thin, there's going to be 3 layers with jam in the middle and chocolate on top. So that's okay if they're thin. Because we're going to fatten them up. Okay. Get in the corner there. Okay. All right, so this one's ready to go in the oven. Okay, so in this bowl, I'm going to be adding green food coloring, and I highly recommend using gel coloring because the liquid coloring is not going to give you much color. And we're going to mix this around. Here's our green. And now we'll do the same for our red layer. Now if you're using the same spatula, you want to clean that off. And here I'm putting my red food coloring. Mix this together. Ooh, nice. So you know the red, white, and green on the rainbow cookies are actually the color of the Italian flag. And it goes so well for Christmas. That's how they became a Christmas tradition, because it had those Christmas colors. Wouldn't be Christmas without them. So we're going to do our green layer now. And you're going to see as this is baking, the dough itself is going to expand and it's going to flatten itself out, so it will be evenly distributed throughout the pan as everything starts to melt and settle while it's baking. So no worries about everything being the same layer, but we try and get it as smooth as we can and evenly distributed. Now when your family tries these, you're going to be a superhero. Not that you aren't already, but you've just gained another superpower. So if this is your first time making rainbow cookies, don't let it be your last time. I know the first time can be a harrowing experience. It's just, it looks a lot more than what it is. And for whatever effort and work that you put into this, it's so worth it. So when I started my YouTube channel and I asked my kids, well, what kind of videos should I do? First suggestion my second son says was, Ma, rainbow cookies. You have to do the rainbow cookies, so you know they're good. So I have my green and my red dough ready to go into the oven. I have my white dough in the oven, and I'm going to check on it, see if it's ready. It's been baking about 12 minutes. I'm going to use my kebab, a wooden kebab skewer, And if it comes out clean, it's ready to come out and another layer to go in. So here's my white layer, and that's done. You can see it browned on top, but that's not going to show because we're going to have our raspberry jelly there. And I have my red layer in the oven. Takes about 12 minutes. So here I have my 3 layers for my rainbow cookies, and what I'm going to do, and they're pretty much cooled down, and what I'm going to do is I have my jar of seedless raspberry jam. Now you can use 1 layer of apricot jam or preserves, 1 layer of raspberry. I'm not fond of apricot, so I just use the raspberry. So I'm going to take my raspberry jam and put it into a bowl. And I am just going to use a whisk to loosen up the jam so that it's easier to spread evenly on my sheets. I'm going to use my bottom layer. You could put any color on the bottom, but the white goes in the middle, so you can put the green or the red on the bottom. And I am going to take half of this jam and spread it on my pink layer. You can use preserves, you can use jam. When you use preserves, the raspberry does have seeds in it. I prefer not to have seeds. And we're going to spread that nice and evenly. We don't want a thick layer because what's going to happen is this is going to seep into our cookies, and if you put too much, we're going to put some weight on these 3 layers once they're all together. We're going to put some weight and we're going to refrigerate them. And now I'll show you the tricky part of getting 1 layer onto the other. Go. And now what I'm going to do is put the rest of the jam here. And spread this evenly. So now we're going to take the sheet of paper, parchment paper that we had on the bottom of one of the pans, so that it's nice and protected. And we're going to take a pan and put it on top of that. Now I'm going to wipe out the bottom of this. It's nice and clean. And I'm going to go find some nice heavy books to put in here because we want to have some weight on there. You can put books if you have a 5-pound bag of sugar. If you have weights, dumbbells, you can put them on there. And I think, you know what, that's what we're going to do. We're going to get the dumbbells and put them on there. So here I have 2 5-pound dumbbells, and I'm going to be putting them on here. There we go. And now we're going to take this and put this on the refrigerator for about minimum 8 hours because we really want this to settle. And during that time, I might move my dumbbells around just to evenly distribute the weight. But this is going to compress our cookies and have our cookies stick together when we cut them. So let's make room in the fridge, and then we're going to put these in there for a while. I'm going to show you how I'm going to take the 3 layers, which have been in the refrigerator for a few hours. I'm going to take a cookie sheet that fits on here, turn this upside down, give it a couple of pats. And there we have our 3 layers that have been in the refrigerator. And now I'm going to flip this back over by putting another cookie sheet underneath it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make the topping with chocolate and heavy cream. Okay, so I put my cookies aside, and I'm going to take my Ghirardelli chocolate chips. I'm going to put them in a microwave-safe bowl. And I'm going to put these in the microwave for about a minute, and I'm going to be stirring it to make sure that they melt. In the meantime, I have some cream that I will be heating up. I'm going to take the heavy cream and just bring it to a simmer. I'm not going to let it boil. So first, let's melt the chocolate chips. So we have our chocolate here, and our chocolate chips are melted. And now I'm going to take my heavy cream that has been brought to a simmer but not a boil. And I'm going to pour this into my chocolate. Now, I am going to let that sit on top of the chocolate for about a minute and a half, before I stir it all together. And the reason we do that is we don't want the cream to curdle. So we're going to let the chocolate, the heat of the chocolate and the heat of the cream come together, acclimate to each other, and then we'll mix it together. And you can see that this has almost a pudding-like consistency. We're going to let this cool down a little bit before we put it on top of our cookies. And then after we put this on top of the cookies, they're going to go back in the fridge for a few minutes. Let's see how this is. Okay, we're going to give it the first coating. I think we're going to do 2 coats. It's like working with paint. Is nice. Alright, so we have the top all coated. That is beautiful. And we are going to put this back in the fridge. And I'm going to check to see if it's set in about 15 minutes. Okay, well, thanks for spending the past 8 hours with me. Time flies when you have an editing tool. So, first thing we're going to take a fork, and very lightly, we're going to just run our fork through the chocolate on top, that wonderful ganache that we made. And we're just going to make a little design on here. If you want, you can clean your fork off with a paper towel. We're going to trim the edges, and that becomes a feast for the family. Okay, so now that I've trimmed the edges, Now that I've trimmed the edges, I'm going to cut down the middle and then cut each of these in half. So we'll have 4 logs. And now we're going to slice it up. And here you have our beautiful rainbow cookies all ready for the holidays. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. It's a little lengthy, but they are so worth it. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel. We'll have wonderful more videos for cooking and crafts and painting and travel. So be sure to subscribe, tell your friends, share, and leave a comment. Let us know how your cookies turn out. Happy holidays!